All right, good evening. The time is 5:01 p.m. This is a special session of the Argyle ISD Board of Trustees. It is October 2nd, 2023. At this time, we will determine if a quorum is present.
Leona McDade present.
Josh Western present.
Richie Effenbaugh present.
Leanne Artho present.
Matt Slayton present.
Craig Hawksworth present.
Sam Slayton present. We do have a quorum established. Mrs. Reed, did you sign up for public comment? Okay. We don't have anyone signed up for public comment, so with that being said, this is a board workshop, so there's no interaction from the public in the audience, and no questions or anything to the board during a public workshop. This is a board workshop, so public comment is the only time, so just want to clarify that for everyone. Okay.
All right.
We'll go ahead and get started.
So September 11th, we had a construction workshop with the Board of Trustees. There were some great questions and then follow-up feedback after that meeting, which led us to an internal district-level construction meeting about a week ago, a little over a week ago, I guess at this point, a week and a half ago. And so we had Marty Sims with VLK Architects. We also had our Bond Oversight Committee Chair, Josh Combs, with us virtually that day, which was of great help. So they're both here today, along with Jeff Cohen with the district, and we're going to continue working on the stadium and IAC update based on your feedback and some additional updates and options for you to consider as a board for us to move forward with design. Okay, so all right, I'll turn it over to Jeff. It looks like.
Good evening. So I'm going to kind of give you the recap of our initial programming, which is where we started the conversation a few weeks ago, and then Marty will come up and he'll go through the four options that we're working on presently and discuss some of those cost estimates on those. So this is a recap of the initial stadium programming that we discussed at the last workshop. This included seating for 6,000, 4,000 home, 2,000 visitors. We were adding 50 accessible parking spaces on home side, 30 accessible parking spaces on the visitor side. Our IAC hasn't changed any, but I just used that on the slide here. So our 22 bond construction only dollars are here, new stadium and indoor activity center for a total of $41.9 million, both of those construction only. That's no soft cost, no furnishings. And then we've got down below the opinion of probable cost that we got from VLK, their original one from the end of August, which was $41.79 million, so just below that total budget. And these are both projects combined. And then here lately, he's gotten an estimate from a contractor partner that he knows, and so their estimate has come in at $35.6 million. For the two projects. So that shows a reduction of $6 million in our original opinion of probable cost that we had to work with.
With some additional parking and some things in there that the board had requested.
This one doesn't have that, right? This is the bare bones.
That is the bare bones.
Okay.
And then
okay.
and then in the options you'll see
Okay.
I was
The
picking
extra.
those things up and still comparing well to the overall budget. So next we've got 4 revised stadium options, and I'll let Marty Sims take you through those and some of the cost.
All right. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. So we were asked to put together 4 options, essentially looking at the location of the fields versus the location of additional parking. Okay. So initially we were minimizing the parking to provide only the accessible spaces needed, and we were utilizing the existing parking to meet our parking count required for the stadium. In these 4 options that I'm going to show you, we've added additional parking to provide home and visitor parking closer to the stadium, with 2 versions, one of which would prioritize the field location to the campus, the other, and push the fields essentially to a less central location or a less close location to the press box and seating. And the other option reverses that. So this is option 1, which essentially represents the additional parking with the current seating count of 6,000, and that would take the total up to 38.1 million, almost 2.2 million. And I would entertain questions. So the things that we want to look at here is this version keeps your existing long jump, triple jump, high jump, but we'll be rebuilding the discus and the shot put as we were originally planning. And it provides parking up close to the building on the visitor side there, and then it provides parking down kind of to the south wedge between the existing detention and that south property line there. Any questions on this?
How did the number of parking spaces come to be? Is it just based on area or specific to?
So it's proportional to the number of parking spaces that you called out in your bond. So at the bond, it was 9,000 seats, so we just reduced it proportionately to 6,000 seats. And that was how we picked that. It's a little bit of an arbitrary number in that we're not trying to meet a parking count, because we're also going to count on the existing parking to make up the delta there. But that was the logic that we chose. So,
Flower Mound doesn't give us a formula we have to use.
well, they do, but that we're utilizing the existing parking to meet whatever over that we need. And so we would propose a 1 to 5. So that would be for every 5 seats, we would propose 1 new parking space. This is a little under that. If you wanted to entertain a 1 to 5 parking ratio, we could look at what that might do to things. But when I was talking with the administration, we thought that a good starting point would be to base it proportionally off the bond.
So just as to backtrack, the original proposal that you brought to us, it had 50 parking spaces.
It was 50 on the home side and another 30 or so on the
Which were just
visitor.
handicap accessible.
It was only the required handicap
So we
accessible.
were gonna rely completely on the parking throughout the high school, and we felt that was just ridiculous, right? So any of this new parking is additive parking to what we.
Yes, sir.
Which is necessary.
Yes, sir.
To have a stadium, to have parking next to it.
What, I just want to know, as an architect, land planner, when you're planning a 6,000 capacity stadium or 7,500 capacity stadium, how much parking are you trying to achieve?
Typically, typically 5 to 1 is a good ratio. We have had municipalities that have tried to do more, and usually that winds up being a financial burden on the school district. Although, on your busiest game of the year, sometimes you'll reach your capacity at 5 to 1. In your case, you've got a lot of overflow parking that you can utilize on site with your existing high school parking.
And so when you add in all the parking on site plus this additional parking, what's my ratio?
Including everything?
I think I'm just trying to keep it apples to apples. You're saying, hey, man, if you gave me a blank canvas and I was gonna go design a 6,000 capacity stadium, this is how much parking I would get.
Sure.
You'd want
Well,
1,200 spots for 6,000 seat and 1,500
yeah, and
spots for.
you've got about 1,200, a little over 1,200 at your high school existing now.
Yeah, and so what would you typically design to? Is-
Without that, as part of a high school or as a standalone stadium?
Standalone.
I would do 5 to 1,
Which is 1,200.
Which is 12.
which is 1,200.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he's giving us 734.
What
This
about,
option is approximately 3 to 1 with
Okay.
our existing parking and the number.
But we have to discount our existing parking to a certain extent. You look, guess that is a north. We'd be asking people to walk across the entire campus to get to the field. If we could take advantage of all the parking next to the current athletic facilities and even close to the over here
How
on
do you
the
feel-
west.
And I should also mention that part of what we will be required to produce for the city is a traffic engineer study on the site, how it's functioning, and a special events plan, which talks about how traffic is managed during events. And they will have some input too on how this gets, how they would recommend laying
how
out.
does the security of travel here work? From a planning standpoint, I see the 2 entrances to the high school serving those spots, and there's no other
Stone
ingress or
gate.
egress.
And then.
a laser pointer on here? Let's see.
You have Stone Gate.
Oh, that's a screen, right? Okay. So in this case, you would come in on the plan west side. Your home would be entering over there. Your visitors would be entering on the plan east side, and you would separate your traffic in ingress and egress out on each of those sides. And so we would envision that the cross area to the north of the field would be for emergency access only during an event, but it's required for fire access.
And I would just want to hear from you that you feel comfortable designing these parking spaces in this stadium here with just those two. It's funneling that traffic in and out with those two.
The more parking we add, the more I think that we're going to have to start to consider accessing it one more entrance. At this point, I'm not showing it, and it wouldn't be my starting point of, if I was going to look at talking to a city. But when we start to talk to the town of Fairmount, which would be our next step, if we land on an agreement here, we start to have the conversations with them about what they feel like. And it wouldn't surprise me if they want to suggest one more site point access, and that could either be down across the bottom of the site on either side.
And what I would like to separate is not necessarily what the city will require or what is required, but what do you think is good from a planning standpoint? Do you, you can fit a lot of things on this piece of paper, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's functional.
Sure,
from a
sure.
practical standpoint. And I just want to know from you that when you laid this thing out that I'm looking at here, that you think from an architectural, land planning perspective, expertise, this parking works, this ingress egress works, this will be a highly functional, good site for a 6,000 capacity stadium.
I think the site, there's nothing wrong with the site for a 6,000 seat stadium, especially with utilizing some of the existing parking that you have, right? If you were going to ask me to put 1,200 new spots on there, I would want to rearrange and provide additional traffic patterns there. I'm not worried about the visitor side, especially at this is the smaller parking of the two, right? So the parking would be increased proportionately at the 7,500 seat option, which we'll show you in just a second. But either way, parking is always a challenge on game day, and so I'm not going to tell you it's going to be a perfect world and that you're not going to have to wait a little bit to get out, after the game. But this is this is comparable to, what you would see at other places.
Will you go to the, rather than going to the 7,500 on this, it's a better comparison to me if you look at option 3, which is 6,000 also, but it's
Absolutely.
redefined parking.
So this is the comparable version, right? So 6,000 seats again. We've got the 440 home and the 299 visitor, so similar there. But in this case, the parking is pulled up right outside of the seating area, which is more traditional for your stadium design. Unfortunately, it takes over some of the practice fields. So what you'll see is we would be building a new field on the left. We actually have the potential to fit a future field or a third practice field, should it be required, down at the far bottom right. It's a bit of a hike. But it's nice to have that location. You could fit one more if you put the detention under, if you put it underground, and that the white spots are the detention areas.
And so the extra cost to this, just looking through the numbers, was going to be about $300,000, and that's the cost of basically moving a practice field
And those pits,
and the
Yeah.
pits.
Yeah.
But it organizes in a much more traditional fashion. And what I like about this option is, one, it gives you parking in the future for indoor, for softball, whatever else, right by the fields. And secondarily, the extension of this, i.e. over the practice fields, makes it actually compatible parking for our students today, where you could have student parking there that's not that far away from the athletic facilities or even the educational wing. To me, that makes it more usable on a day-to-day basis. Versus the other one, option 1, was showing that would be an isolated parking simply for game days. And this could be used throughout.
Sure, could be used by your athletes
And I
during
think,
the.
to me, it's worth the extra $300,000 to do it in this manner.
Jeff, remind me, clearly we're going to be expanding this campus at some point, to some degree. If we were to move forward with this proposal, and as Mr. Defenwald pointed out, it's potentially better use of parking space for students. But as we expand, what other, do we need more parking? where will that parking go? In any of these decisions, I don't want to back us into a corner. So, just from a design layout perspective, what are we dealing with?
Yes, if we do expand the campus, which we know we're gonna have to at some point, we will need additional parking. But the way Flower Mound looks at this, it's all one site. So when they start doing their parking calculations, they're gonna count everything we have against that number. So with adding parking for the stadium, say at this level, then we will already be over the ratio that they would calculate just for the school expansion.
Right, but from a
So
student
with this
perspective.
addition, I would not expect any more because we're already gonna be over those totals.
Okay, so we're expecting students to potentially use that visitor parking lot.
They would need to, yes, with the expansion of the school.
Or the north end of the home side, right?
Yeah, both of them.
Well, both, yeah, that one's closer.
Of course, we can always ask for a variance from the town, but it doesn't mean they'll grant it. But we can always ask for that, to do additional parking closer to the expansion of the high school.
So, can we go back to game day? You got whatever it is, 39 spots. We're talking about using, you'll also take into account the parking that's existing in front of the field house, between the field house and the school.
Right.
Where do the 10 buses that show up from a school park? Because they can't park in those spots there because we won't have enough then.
So we're showing new bus parking to the south of the stadium. So if you look at that, just kind of south below the concession restrooms
cutouts.
boxes,
You have a pointer.
it doesn't.
It doesn't work on the screen.
Doesn't work.
Yeah, yeah.
So they can back in, I guess.
Yes, yes. So those would be 2 new buses, and then there's the buses up by the tennis courts as well for additional.
But then again,
And-
the idea is to use the IAC as a visitor locker room, correct?
Yes, yes. So there is also, I wish I had a pointer. Is there a way to?
I don't think you'll see it on there.
Okay, so I have to talk in the mic here. So there's also loading and unloading zones along the stadium running north-south that would fit. The paper kind of covers it up, but we were showing 3 buses in those locations. So there and there, you should be able to fit 2 to 3 buses in each of those. And there's another one that runs along the north side as well. Now that wouldn't be where I would park them, but from a loading and unloading standpoint, and then they go off and park.
Jeff, can you tell me what's the parking capacity over at the current middle school?
I'd have to go back and do a count. I believe it's 850, 880.
In a total or in the main parking lot?
Total.
Total. Okay.
Total.
So that's all is that including what was previously the band parking lot?
It does include that, yes.
Okay.
889, not including those along Cook Street and west of the stadium.
Okay, thank you.
So you're talking about not the spots that are behind the home stands right now?
Does not include those.
Okay.
And there is,
And Cook Street.
and this is just a concern I have with the security of travel that I keep going back to. When I look at that site, 889 spaces, you have Cook Street entrance, you have the,
Harpool
Off of
and
Harpool.
377.
and then you have the one off of 377 as well, right? Yes.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's it.
That's it.
So on our available land, our current land, we could build a side road to go to this parking, but we wouldn't be able to have an extended road because we don't own the land currently due south of this project.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And isn't that Stonecrest Road that comes down on the right
Stonecrest on the right and then Creek on the left.
and Denton Creek on the left? Okay,
And there is potential that we could connect those following that south property line.
gotcha.
So that we could potentially actually connect the two roads, just not, straight across the other property that's
But
not
with the
ours.
land we have currently, or we'd have to,
Yeah, currently your property line is the extent of the kind of green area there, so.
yeah, but we couldn't connect all the way across with our current property. We have to
No.
buy the land south of us.
It wouldn't be a straight line,
Well, you
but
can
it
connect
would
it now.
turn north, kind of where we're showing the extra parking spaces, and then run along the south where we've got the parking, the drive
So the
wrapping
di-
around the
There's
south
room there,
already.
you're saying.
So the
Yes.
discus and shot will be high enough that we could put a road in there if
Yes.
we wanted or needed to.
And we're rebuilding those, so we could shift them a little bit north to create a 24-foot
Enough space.
fire lane access along that route. Ideally, you would want it on the home side, just because you're gonna have theoretically more home traffic. But, that's possibly a shorter run over there. So we could look at both options with the traffic engineer and make a recommendation based on where they think we're gonna be seeing the greatest ingress and egress directionally, where people are headed and coming from.
But we know how expensive roads are, we just built a fire lane.
Yes, sir. That's why I was trying not to have
But
to
we
do
don't
it.
want to, but
No.
if we're forced to, or.
So can you move the smaller of those two baseball, softball fields up into that corner, or is the detention pond there in the way? Is there room to do that, which would give you a little bit more room to the west, I guess?
Potentially.
I guess in option, where's option 4? Yeah,
There's some wasted space up there.
yeah, I don't know if it's to scale or what's
It is,
going on
it is to
there.
scale, and of course, all of that is future, so we've got all kinds of flexibility with regard to those two facilities. The white box in the center would be a future concession stand, and the dashed road around it is fire access, which needs to get close to the stands. And so if we move it over there, we would need to extend that out, which we could certainly look at doing. It's a little bit more of a hike too for mom and dad coming from the parking over there, and sometimes we hear complaints about that. But
That's another reason for the parking here. I mean, it's pretty nice. It's pretty close to the,
yes, sir.
So, I guess what I'm thinking is, and I don't know if this is even possible, but if you could move the smaller of the two up into that corner, if there was room, you move that little road with the concession stand, so it goes basically to where you have those two, and it can kind of come up between them, so you have a concession stand, it's not that much longer. Maybe for right now, this possible practice field that's over in the corner, not there, which I know that's probably not a popular choice. And then you take your field stuff and you kind of reorganize it. Can you fit more parking there to the east of what you've already got?
Sure, and if we lose that field, and actually one of the other options you'll see I've proposed that we shifted everything to the right to allocate additional parking there for the
Oh, okay.
larger
I see
parking
that
count for the
one.
7,500 seats.
Oh, okay, I see that. In number 4?
Yeah, I believe it's number 4.
But see, number 4 still has that practice field there. And I'm thinking of not having that practice field, moving the field events over, or moving
Yeah,
them
so-
around and then adding more parking where the field events are.
You're right. I was able to fit them in. I thought I was going to have to lose that field when I laid it out, but it squeezed in. You can see how close to the road it is. It's not. It's pretty tight. But to answer your
Just a
question,
thought.
absolutely, sure, we could look at doing that. So if there was a directive was given that we needed more parking on the visitor side, we could extend it out that way.
is that the problem you're trying to fix? You want more parking on the visitor side?
Well, just more parking in general. I mean, if you're gonna have 2 baseball, softball fields there, I think you're gonna need more.
Well, you'd still be able to access all the parking that is north of the,
And I should point out the logic behind the seating.
More
It
kids
was.
will be there.
Pardon me, I'm sorry that I didn't mean to
okay,
interrupt you.
sorry.
The logic behind the seating is 60% home, 40% visitors, and we've
Right.
applied the same to the parking. So,
Okay.
that you could argue that, depending on how many visitors versus home you get, that we could massage that if we needed to.
Well, I mean, then could you keep the practice field over there? Remove the one on the west side and then extend the home parking? then I know that we're talking about 2 practice fields total, an IAC, and then the field itself, which gives them 4 places to practice.
I might consider doing an L-shaped parking across the south across the south property line prior
That's
to
a
that,
thought too, yeah.
you know? And that way, you know, in your busiest games, that parking would fill up, but it would be the, you know, the least desirable, obviously, probably, versus being on the other side of the high school. But that would allow your field still to have a close proximity for your athletes.
And we really need the 2 together just from a supervision standpoint when they're all
That's
out
true.
there too.
Yeah, okay. So what are you talking about? How many, I guess, again, you're looking at cost. And how many parking spaces do you think you can get there with the detention pond, and what's the cost on that? I'm not asking for an answer like this second, but that
Well,
would be the consideration.
Sure, yeah, and so I've provided some preliminary cost here that would show these, you know, these 4 options. The most expensive, which would be the additional seats and the additional parking associated with them, you know, is still a little bit under your total budget. And so, you know, I think if I was in your shoes, my recommendation is going to be that we look at doing an alternate for some of these items. So there's things that are easily delineated in the documents. We can get a price on bid day, get real bid day pricing, and then you can make this determination if you want to do them or not. And you'll know at that point what the cost is. So seating, we could do that. The only problem with seating is you have to make a choice on the restrooms for that seating. So you kind of have to commit to them because it's a lot more difficult to do restrooms as an alternate. But aluminum bleachers would be a potential alternate. There's all kinds of lighting that we could look at. You know, I know that there's been discussions around, you know, the RGB lighting and how we can do things like that. Those are very easy alternates that we can get numbers on bid day and make the determination if it's something that we want to include or not include. That would be at your discretion.
Marty, can we go ahead and run through option 2 and 4, and then that way we've got all 4 that we can look at, and then we can go back
Absolutely.
and ask questions from all.
So the main difference between these 2 options is we're looking at doing a 7,500 seating option, right? So again, 60-40 split between the 1,500 added seats. So you'll see on each side of the bleachers they've extended to provide that. And we've upped the parking proportionately to accommodate that, and it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 960 total parking. But we've got 550 on the home and 367 on the visitors. So in this first option, again, this is the option that tries to save as much of the field as we can, and it saves the existing long jump, high jump, triple jump. It pushes the parking down towards the south property line. On the home side, on the visitor side, we have to kind of loop around the existing field events there. So that's this option. This represents 39.9 million.
And then 4 had the 6 that, yeah, 4.
So 4, this is the closer parking version, right? So we've pulled the parking back up. We're adding the new field on the edge. So we've got essentially two fields with the potential for a third one on the other side. And we've added the parking on each side up close, like you might typically see at a traditional stadium.
Mr. Combs, I have a question for you. And correct me if I'm wrong. I had heard that one of your thoughts was based upon you talking with community members and your thoughts as a representative of the BOC, that the parking away options were what you felt were better instead of the parking close to the stadium, keeping the fields closer to the stadium for students. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. Yeah, I called a few community members and I had a conversation with them about that. And their experience was that a lot of the stadiums they've been to, they've had to walk a reasonable distance, and that they wouldn't be opposed to that. That wouldn't be something that they greatly regretted or were disappointed by. Now, I'm sure that doesn't speak for everyone, but the several people I spoke to did say that.
Because I know we talked about and again, it just depends on the straw poll you take. Some people want parking closer, and the students have a shorter walk in utilizing those spaces versus, the students that use the practice fields, wanting them to be closer to the facilities and having a longer walk parking, so, okay. Thank you.
So I know the option 4 is obviously the most expensive, but it's for the 7,500 spots. So the 1,500 of extra seating, it amounts to versus option 2.
187, 183,
Is that correct? So it's only
917.
almost $200,000 more. Is all.
It's about 1.2 million for seating and parking.
178 more parking spots, 1,500 more seats.
I guess.
I'm sorry, were you talking dollars or?
Yeah, I'm talking dollar amount. So my sheet shows option 2 is 39.9. Is that correct?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then 40.2, basically for stadium 4.
Oh, I'm comparing option 3 versus 4. Never mind. So for the extra seats, option 3 versus option 4, it's about 1.6 million. You said 1.7.
Yeah, so the additional seats, if you look at, so we've got the additional
Look at,
seating is about 645,000. Additional toilets to
1.8.
accommodate that seating was about 517.
Rough one.
Which
Okay,
I
that's
put it
gonna be
at.
the same
Right.
no matter the parking.
Right.
Is there any thoughts, and this is something I just saw the other night at the game, we were forced into adding the seating structure for the band at our current facility just because we were running out of room, right? But it's turned out to be kind of a good thing, I think. Having the band out there exposed with the music. And I just wonder, would this drawing, if we said that that's a neat thing, would this structure be able to house a seating for the band, like 200?
Similar to Melissa, like Melissa has their band in the end zone.
So
Yeah.
we actually
I see
talked
that.
to Fine Arts. They were initially requesting in the neighborhood of 1,200 seats. I think there's for instruments and equipment and other things that are required to go with not only the band but the drill team and I believe there's a third group also that performs perhaps or spirit something or other. Apologies for not remembering the name, but yes. So we looked at a location to put that for a freestanding bleachers. I think right now you have it in your end zone. Is that right? Which is not bad because but I know that they want to be able to run football drills in the D's, and so they would prefer that was turfed in order to be running drills, pull-off drills in those D's as opposed to having the stands there. So we would, have to make that determination who gets to own that real estate. The next best option would be to put it on the paving, assuming we didn't want to put it on the visitor side, which I know you probably don't want to do, but there's more real estate over there. We would put it in front of the concession and toilets and concession on the kind of the southwest corner, and you could even kind of angle it towards the field. You don't have as good of a direct line of sound to the stands, which is what you would want in that situation. And so it's not ideal in that regard, but because they also want to be able to see the field, they have to know when to play the touchdown, song. So that's you're kind of having to take a compromise there.
We happened upon that, and I think it turned out to be a good thing. And I just wondered whether we couldn't.
And we talked about, there could be an option where that was done after the fact, or it could be, it could be an alternate, like I was discussing some of those other alternates.
And so Bird was asking for 1,200.
That was the discussion. Yeah.
1,200 seats.
I mean, they're
Seats.
projected to add 110 freshmen to the band next year. So
But they're 100 right now, or 120, right?
the band in total.
150, yeah.
150.
That's not just in bodies. They're talking about taking up 3 or 4 seats per person with the instruments and the flags and everything that goes with
So
them.
they would be doing
So
that
it's
anyway,
1,200
no matter what
seats,
structure we
but not
have.
for
Right,
the
and
band.
drill team,
Which-
yes. Logistics.
Is it accurate that is this the screen?
That blue rectangle.
That's the video board.
That would be the video.
Oh,
Okay, so you could have one end zone with band and still have one of the D's for drills
For the home team.
for the home team.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Are we talking about making those permanent structure?
I wasn't.
I don't think you have to, because
We don't do it now, it works
we don't do it
fine.
now, we move it out with
Right,
track.
well,
I
it's-
just
so
don't know
it's-
if 1,200 seats of bleachers in the end zone is movable.
Right. And so just
We might
keep
need
in
to
mind.
compromise on the 1,200 seats. I mean, that
How
seems
many seats are there
extraordinary.
now for the band? Do we know?
Now they would be sitting in the stands.
I mean, in the end
What are you
zone.
talking about?
Oh, at your
middle
existing.
school.
Is it 5?
Yeah,
Do we know how many seats are there?
I don't know that. I'd have to find out.
500.
500 is that many? Okay, it doesn't seem that.
The drill team's not over there though, right?
Right, the drill team's on the track at home.
Marty, how do you like this site for a 7,500 capacity stadium, and how do you like this site for a 9,000 capacity stadium?
I think that it works equally well, all the way up to 9,000. I don't know that you would want to go more than that, but I wouldn't go more than that. The parking becomes the challenge, and fighting for space with the program space, as we're kind of demonstrating here. But I think you could get 9,000 out of it with what we've got, and happy to show you a layout of what that would look like as well if you care to see it.
Because last time you were here, you were saying I'd like 30 or 40, maybe 40 or 50 acres for that.
If I was going to do a standalone stadium, ground up without any existing parking, ideally I would have 45 acres on a flat site.
How many are we working with here?
Probably about.
108.
What's your total acreage?
Yeah, but half-
100
half-
I'm talking about for the
half-
stadium.
half of it's school.
Right, but that's taking all the parking that's around the school and adding it around the stadium.
Yeah.
That's what he's saying.
So the advantage you have is you've got, quite a bit of existing parking that we can, if we choose to, utilize, and that helps save on those, not only the cost, but the square footage.
These renderings, they add room for 4 more tennis courts.
Potentially, or if you ever had a tennis building, that could be, that could go over there. That if we're dreaming, I think that might be on the table for somebody. And then you've still got room up in that northeast corner, where that detention is. The detention is really large in the southwest corner. I think it's 360 cubic yards, it would be about 2.6 or 2.7 million to put underground. And then you could have that flat again, but that's a big investment. The smaller one on the right side is an easier ask if we ever wanted to consider that in the future to pick up another field, say.
What did you say that one would cost on the west?
About 2.7 million.
Okay, thank you.
Can you go to 4 for me for a second?
Yes, sir.
So it's $80,000 to move long jump, high jump, all that?
Yes.
So there could be a 2A or 4A where there's, the parking's up close on the home side, but you go back to what you have in option 2 on the visitor where you don't move it and go around it.
Yeah, I do have to point out that, having parking on either side of those events, we would need to look at, do we want people walking across those events, to get there, or do we want to fence it and have them walk around it, those type things?
Mm-hmm.
It's not ideal. I mean, I don't love that configuration for that reason, but certainly we could look at doing that.
You were given a kind of a raw hand when we actually built a practice facility so close to the stadium, even though we knew that we were going to make this a stadium at some point. When they built long jump right next to the stadium, even though we knew we were going to have, I'm not sure what direction was given by what architect, but to me, it basically is going to cost us nearly $300,000 to make up for those bad mistakes. But $300,000 in a $40 million budget I think is worth spending to have a good product at the end.
Now, I will say I spoke with Musco this morning, and in fact, I just had them send me some revised pricing. And that's the lighting manufacturer. They said you could reuse both the poles and the fixtures at a middle school site very easily. And it's perfectly suited for that, should you choose to do that. They could potentially reuse the fixtures, but the fixtures that we would propose for that's going to get you what I think you're looking for a facility like this. It doesn't. You're trying to make something out of something that's not quite there yet. So, you know, like they're 50-foot candles right now. I would advise you go up to 75. That's what Melissa just did in their stadium. It allows for the filming to look really good. If you're on if they're playing replays on the news, your field won't look dark. And if you care if you're interested in some of the more showy options, I've got some pricing on those as well.
Where did you say from the last time we met here a few weeks ago to today, we've cut $6 million from the estimates? And I'd just like to know where those savings occurred.
Sure. So it's a combination of things. So we've further looked at defining let's say the restrooms and the toilets as concrete painted cinder block walls, very basic unit heaters in there to keep them from freezing. We're not necessarily looking at air conditioning those, those type of things. So we're defining those pieces. The civil engineer was, because typically they come on a little later than we start. And so they've been able to look at the site and provide a little more delineation on what's going on with the site. I had put a large site cost in there, and I was real conservative on that. So part of that is just me being overly conservative. So we picked up some savings there. And then bringing the general contractor on as who provided the pricing as a favor, they were able to give a real itemized kind of a list and actually reach out to some subcontractors and get their pricing. You always feel a little better when you get more input along those lines. And so there were some areas there where where they were just they feel like it's going to be a little lower than what we were carrying.
Okay, so when I go back and look, you said in the site work there was about
the site work's the biggest one.
There was about $6 million estimated in site work between the stadium and the indoor. So of the $40 million, $6 million was for site work. What are you estimating?
What would that site work cost out of that estimate? It's hard to say because I was lumping it into that, and they've got it in. It's like I had paving priced separately. That would be, they've got prep for that paving in their site work number. It's real hard to get it apples to apples. I did it for the as an example of the restroom and concessions. I think my number was 555, 545.
546.
Okay, 546. They're coming in closer to 420. And that, I think, is, I was assuming a worst case scenario with tile and more expensive kind of finishes. And as part of the exercise going through, we clarified, what we just talked about, with the concrete floors and the painted walls and those type of things.
So can we go back to lights for a minute?
Yes, sir.
You said that they can be reused. So right now, what's in here? 75 candle?
So right now for the current estimate for lights, I've got 750,000. And you can get, what I'm being told is it would be 655 is the price I just got from Musco like an hour ago for a 75-foot candle system. Now that doesn't include the sound, so that's just the lights. I do have some numbers in here for sound, but I think I'm a little under on that, so the two will probably wash out. So 655 would get you the system. It doesn't get you the RGB. The RGB they're saying is only about $60,000 upgrade.
That comes from Musco too?
That also comes from Musco, yes, sir. And so they would provide and there's a great video if you want to check it out. It's similar to what you've seen, but it does where it travels around. You can do the different configurations, and there's an iPad that controls it. It's pretty slick. And then you can integrate that in with the music, which obviously if you want some, if you're going to do the lights, you probably want it to have some sound to go along with it. And so, we want to make sure that we provide the sound for that as well.
So Jeff, is the thought that we would use those existing ones we take down at middle school 1?
That would be one option for those, yes.
What's another option?
Another option would be to move them on site and use them for practice field. We currently only have one practice field that's lit.
Do we have the infrastructure? Well, we're gonna be getting rid of one of them. Is that the one that's lit?
No, that's not the one that's lit. It's the one that's furthest away. So it'd be the number 2 field, so it's the middle field here if you're looking at 3 on the west.
Number
it's
2
the middle.
field here
This one.
Correct.
is lit now.
Correct.
Okay.
So Marty, I'm going back to concession stands.
Yes, sir.
And so I looked at, you're estimating 9,709 square feet of concession stands on the home side and 4,853 square feet of concession stands and bathrooms on the visitor side.
Yes, sir.
And so if I'm doing my math correctly, at $420 a square foot, we're gonna spend $6.1 million on concession stands and bathrooms.
That sounds right.
Which is
It was 9
which is
million.
three almost 3.5 million less than what we originally heard.
But I received a text today showing a Texas Roadhouse being built for $2 million. And each concession stand bathroom is $3 million. It just,
I mean,
Hey, welcome to schools.
and I'm not fussing. The reason it just drives me crazy.
Yes, sir.
Is because you're telling me a stripped down concession stand and bathroom with no air conditioning, with really no tile, is $420 a square foot.
Yeah, I mean, I understand it sounds ludicrous, but that's what we're seeing in the market right now.
It is ludicrous. There is, I mean, like you said, you can build first class restaurants for less.
Yeah,
He said
you know.
Roadhouse.
That is for
I can't
Western,
even go.
that's
I won't even go in it.
It's Western.
Because it's so busy.
Now,
Come
you
on.
know, we're talking, concrete masonry, steel structure, metal roof, right? Because the city requires, the town requires the metal slope roof. We would plan the metal roof to match your existing. We're putting stone on the outside so it matches the aesthetic. We could,
I know, but it's still, I mean, our school, I just approved the price on the school that was $400 for an elementary school, which I choked on, for $410 a square foot.
Yeah.
And I'm getting air conditioning, kitchens, lots of bathrooms, tile. And here I'm getting a cinder block, no AC for more per square foot. It doesn't make sense.
so I reached out to a second contractor friend of mine and asked for a second opinion on that number, and he came back at 520.
I know, but
because they can.
it doesn't add up. I mean, I'm just saying, if I can build a school with better finish out,
Yeah.
kitchens and stuff. it
Now,
doesn't make sense.
but we got this estimate, which might be a reasonable estimate, we might actually hold to it if they won the CSP.
Mm-hmm.
But the good news is, I think this is going to be CSP, right? And
Yes.
so
That should give you
someone
your
might come in there even more reasonable.
that should give you your best value, right? So, the job is we want to get as much interest as we can and get as many people bidding it as possible and let the market set the value,
Yep.
right? So if the people are telling me incorrectly, the market will correct it when it goes out to bid. Now, I don't want to cut something that you dearly want in the meantime because we got a fat number. I'm trying to find that right balance for you.
So Jeff, is it you and Marty that go through those bids that come in to make sure they didn't miss anything, that we don't get change ordered later?
That's gonna be based on the accuracy we get in our documents. So with the CSP, if we didn't get it in the documents that VLK will prepare, then it will be an additional cost to us. So what we have to do, and mainly Marty's team is doing internal checks, but then before it goes out to bid, we'll do a sit down, go through page by page and try to make sure everything is in there as it should be to avoid those.
So if it's in there and CSP missed it, it's on them.
Correct. And it's no additional cost for us.
Okay.
So going back to the lights, you said the ones that are out there are 50-foot candles. Really would like to have 75.
Correct.
Is there any kind of savings at all in adding lights to where that is now rather than moving the ones that are there?
Well, the locations aren't ideal where they're at now. They're on the 15-yard line right behind the track. The new location, the ideal location, which we would propose doing, because we could, would be to set them on the 0-yard lines and back even with the face of the front of the press box. And that's what the lighting design experts tell me is the best location. And so that'll give you the most flexibility to provide all of the different functions you want. And so We're looking at making sure that not only the field is lit, but your track is lit, and then we're providing, lighting for the grandstands as well on both sides.
So how did they get put at the 15-yard line? Just ask.
I asked Musco that, and they couldn't tell me because I expressed that there was some frustration as to how they might have been put there, if they were going to need to be moved.
My understanding is there was no stadium plan when that field was put in, so there was no full build out for them to review, or that thinking piece wasn't there to put them in the correct place.
I will say that's exactly where we would put them if there wasn't going to be bleachers added.
But we knew that was phase
But we
one.
knew it was gonna be the
We
stadium.
knew that was phase one. I'm not saying that to you.
Not
or-
you, not.
So
Person
you're
that
saying
put them
if you
there
knew
100%
weren't gonna be
knew there was
bleachers,
gonna
you
be a
would've put them
stadium.
in the 15
Or if there was only going to be 2,000 bleachers.
Right.
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 Gotcha.
It wasn't gonna be a full stadium,
Gotcha, okay.
more of a sub-varsity site or.
So because of lack of a future plan, they got put assuming there wasn't gonna be anything else
No,
there.
we
I don't
had
think there was a
field.
lack of
There
future.
It wasn't a
There
lack
was
of
a
future
execute.
plan, it's always been the stadium, it wasn't communicated.
Gotcha, well,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly, okay.
And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to make sure we looked at the softball and the baseball and think through a potential tennis building and really trying to think through what could possibly be on the table here. Not being able to predict the future, but if we could think that it might be a possibility, we can make sure that we try to accommodate it.
So nothing was ever really laid out, even to this extent, when the property was first.
That
Purchase
predates
and
my involvement. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a frustrating piece.
Yeah.
It's,
Because
This
it wouldn't have
layout that
costed
we're
us
looking
money.
at, other than what he penciled in, came from that first architect.
Gotcha.
They knew 100% what the plan was.
Right.
He's not in here, but he 100% knew. If he was standing here, he'd be paying for moving those lights.
So somebody put them on the 15-yard line.
it wasn't communicated.
Well, and
Yeah,
I
it
think
wasn't
that's
communicated.
why this exercise is so important, so that
Yes.
hopefully we're not making those same mistakes.
Take your
Right.
time.
Right.
And it is being communicated, and we're not putting a softball field where it's not
Where we're gonna put a
optimal.
parking lot, yeah.
Right.
Right.
And kind of along those lines, I believe there probably are differences right now on how this parking is laid out. If this parking was not added, we barely had enough parking currently for that 1-to-5 ratio on a 6,000 seat stadium, right? So even at the point where we were talking about a 9,000 seat stadium, the parking wasn't going to be there.
Right.
I like that the parking is closer to the stadium, and the numbers show me that if we are using that ratio 1-to-5, then depending on student parking between the school and the field house, that parking lot and the 2 new parking lots should suffice for most of the parking for events.
Yeah.
There'll be a little overflow perhaps, but that'll take care of most of it. If this parking was solely for stadium and activities, then, I personally would prefer those practice fields closer to the field house. However, we've been told tonight that this parking will be used as student parking.
Correct.
Since this is going to be used as student parking, I feel it's better use of space to have that parking as close to the current high school as possible. I don't mind my athletes walking as far as, I don't mind tennis and whoever's using the practice fields having to walk the same distance to a field. They're going to be using the stadium field and the indoor facility more often. Whoever can get access to those, that's going to be the primary location. Everything else will be overflow. So I prefer option 2 and 4, or 3 and 4 with regard. I like the bigger stadium myself, but I like the parking
Yeah.
closer to the stadium and moving the fields out if we need to.
Yeah, and I agree with
4.
I agree with Mr.
4
Slayton.
and
Stadium
3.
4 is, for all of his reasons, and I also feel
Yeah,
it's
but it's still-
commiserate with what I personally like to see that's closest to what the bond was asking for. And looking at ultimately, depending on growth, a community stadium that will, endure the build out of this district. So, And me personally, it's difficult for me to build something now knowing that we could be putting stadium renovations on an upcoming bond in May that we haven't even broke ground on yet. So I like that it's under budget. I like that it's close to what we've what our voters voted for on the bond, and that the parking is there. So that's my thoughts.
I may be the unicorn up here,
You are.
You are.
okay, but
In many ways.
I agree with the parking's probably closer is better. That certainly you could have dual purpose parking that students can use for school and for the stadium. But I like smaller. I think smaller is better. I think this site is better suited for a smaller. I think when you go bigger, you're gonna add variables at the town level that are gonna increase the cost, potentially. You're gonna have to add all those bathrooms, and I think when you open this stadium, hopefully in 2025, you don't need 7,500, that you will have time to grow into that. And I think that if you open up a 7,500 capacity stadium in 2025, the stadium's gonna be bigger, and it's gonna kill the atmosphere. I like our small stadiums that are packed, and I think when you go to these other stadiums that are large and overbuilt, it really kills the atmosphere for everybody there. So I think that knowing that we probably don't need 7,500 seats for a very long time, and all the variables that adds in terms of bathroom cost, probably road and infrastructure cost, additional parking, that the smaller 6,000 closer parking site would serve our immediate needs, then we could grow into and add aluminum stands later, and we can add streets later.
I would vote for a hybrid, meaning, I agree, the 6,000,
Your delta's 1.8.
option three,
That's
well, hear me out. The option three, the 6,000, has enough parking to help us sustain even as the high school grows. But with that, only 3,600 of those 6,000 would be on the home side. And from what I hear you saying, they're gonna want 1,200 of those reserved for the band. So that leaves 2,400. So I would vote for a 6,000 seat stadium, but with also on the end zones, whatever else, another 1,200 feet for the band. Not 1,200 feet, but 1,200 seats, or 1,000 seats, whatever that is, which I think is the best of all worlds. I mean, those are kind of not free, but I don't think they'd be tied into the capacity of the restrooms and everything else.
Well,
Or parking.
the municipality will look at those as restrooms as well, and so.
But do you hear my point that if we're gonna have 1/3 of our home stands filled with the band, that limits tickets?
So you're really wanting 7,200?
Well, I'm saying, yeah. Well, I don't want
And putting 1,200 in the end zone.
the band to be on the home side taking up those
I like the
seats.
band in the end zone. I like it because you can,
Yeah.
sound comes at you, so I like that
Do they
too.
like them? Does the band like to be in the end zone?
I mean,
They don't really care. I don't.
they like the interactions with.
My end of
And it's
one
kind of their own
is, but,
space, right? Nobody's around.
So
them.
the other thing is looking at, cost of, we know the delta is 1.8 million here between 6,000 and 7,500. And so looking at what does that cost our taxpayers, down the road if we delay that, because it's not just plug and play, adding on seats to a stadium. There's going to be other costs, like Mr. Westrom spoke to, like by adding on to an existing stadium. And potentially, you have to look about turnaround time, right? Is that something that, you start the first day that, the season's over, and then those facilities, especially track season, like, I don't know, can you add on 1,500 seats and facilities and all of that in a summer where there's no events going on, or does it take more time than that?
So if it was treated like a not very portable bleacher system, okay, meaning that there's not a expansive foundation, it's sitting on sidewalk or sitting on some sort of a thickened slab, as opposed to your grandstands will be on piers, right? Then it's fabricated off-site, it's shipped in pieces, and it's bolted together. It's fairly quick. If And that's really, you know, more typically what we would see in a situation like this. You've got, so it's not, so you'll see more supports underneath and things like that. You're not traveling underneath the bleachers, right? Like you do on the home and visitor, or the home side, not necessarily the visitor side. So, you know, that's not as big of an issue. You know, you're certainly looking at, they're predicting 6% inflation this year, 5% the next, and then back down to 4%, but it's anybody's guess as to, you know, how that goes. And that's just one source, you know, everybody will tell you something different. So, you know, you certainly would incur those costs by delaying that work. So, you know, that is a very easy alternate too. You know, that's one that, you know, provided we, again, take care of the restrooms and satisfy the city, or the town, I'm sorry, with regard to those, and we come to an agreement on parking, we could very easily call the, you know, call that out as an alternate, get you a bid day price, and you could at your discretion decide to do it or not do it, or, you know, even, you know, potentially even down the duration of the project before it finished, decide it, you know, set that money aside and pull the trigger later.
Liz or Rick, have we sold out yet this year?
Yeah.
3,200?
No.
I would have to look at the actual total.
Well, the seats were sold before we ever started.
No,
I
the
thought.
reserve.
Parents'
Just
conference?
reserve.
Yes.
We
reserve
haven't
sold out.
had a sellout.
So, but
From
I
general
would say
fund.
too, though, you have to, like, in past bonds, we were lucky enough to do things efficiently. We could move things forward, i.e. that competition gym wasn't supposed to be part of phase 2, but because we could build it in today's dollars, which was back then, we saved money doing it, right? So we did tell the community we were gonna do 9,000 seat stadium. We're getting pushed out of that due to cost, but this can get us closer to it, and we're doing it in today's dollars. If we grow into it, I don't necessarily have a problem with that, except that 1.8 delta is gonna be what? And so now I did cost the taxpayers more money. We're staying under the budget they gave us. We're doing it in today's dollars.
I guess the other thing to look at is, yes, technically you didn't have a sellout, but the home side's full. The home side's at capacity. Like it's standing room only there.
Is
on
that
the
a
home
good
side.
thing or a bad thing?
If we're preventing people from actually having a seat, then
I don't know. I mean,
we
is
are.
it-
I mean, you look
are
at,
we preventing people from having a seat?
well, there are people standing without a seat.
And we
I
have
mean,
the high school staff in the end zone.
because there's not enough seats for them. I mean, I get the close nature atmosphere, but yeah, drill doesn't have seats, which they sit at others. So, I mean, there's options to put more people on the home side, and like Marty said, we don't have to do a 60-40 split.
We do a 70-30
we can do
or
70-30.
Yeah, I think I would absolutely
I would
be on
Yeah.
board, yeah.
Yes.
So how
I
many
would
seats
too.
are on the home side now?
Okay, so,
We need to
Around
get right.
No, at our current stadium.
Oh, at your current stadium.
Around 22.
Okay,
We're,
I mean,
we're somewhere
for the
between 32 and 35, and there's around 1,000
No,
on the
there's no
district.
action.
32 and 35 on the home side?
No, no,
No,
no,
that's
no,
total.
I don't need
Oh,
us.
total.
I mean,
Okay.
That does not include the additional seating in the band.
So, and how many would we have if we did 7,500 at this new one? And let's say we did go 70-30, how many seats would we have? That would be
That's 52-50.
5250?
50 on the home side, and then the balance of the 7,500 being the visitor.
And is it a
Yeah.
possibility for the time being that we could move the bleachers that are being used by the band at the middle school to the stadium
sure.
Yeah.
for a time to give us that extra seating without having to build anything? And then in a future bond, if we're doing something at what would be the second high school, we can always reconfigure and put those there.
And the other thing, at 52-50, if the band needs 1,200 and drill and flag corps and whoever, they need 1,200 seats, it's something that we could grow into. They could have 1,200 in the stands initially, and then something down the road, we start moving them over to the end zone. So you have 4,000 seats instead of 52-50, and 4,000 for, the community until we grow into it. So.
Jeff, what's the timeline on, that you need from us, direction, to meet the project timeline? Are we ahead, behind?
We're behind. We need to keep moving as fast as we possibly can.
Okay.
Right. And we're not taking action here tonight, but we need to give direction, feedback. So we've heard three different thoughts from 5 different board members.
Well, just to be clear, so Liz, all of these are under budget.
That's correct.
If they come in under budget, whichever one we pick, these were different props. So what can we do with the funds after the fact?
So we'll do a little research on this.
Spend them on the stadium or their IAC.
Well,
We specifically stated stadium at 60, whatever the address is,
Yep.
6601 Canyon Falls Drive, and we specifically said the IAC at this location as well. So those were the two written in the actual proposition.
So it'd probably go into alternates of those two facilities,
Yeah.
those two projects.
Well, it could a
It could be your
road or
bleachers in the
Parking,
future.
yes.
entry road be part of that.
Well, and you mentioned these are construction costs, and it doesn't include any of the soft costs, right?
Well, that's assuming that we come in
We're
under budget.
yes, we're comparing construction budget to construction
Construction to
costs.
construction.
We have a soft cost budget as well, an architect budget.
That's,
Do we
that's
think
different
that's
than
gonna
that
be,
41.
does that think that we're gonna be in line with that, or is that gonna be over budget like
I
other?
feel like those are gonna be in line.
Okay.
I mean, we could consult a bond attorney, obviously, but down the road, if there were monies left over in the stadium proposition, I would think you could use that for end zone stands for the band.
Oh, yes, anything at the stadium would.
Just not
anything
that
within the
stadium.
project
Right.
that falls in line with it.
Right.
So the parking, the drive up.
Well, I know
anything
a lot of us know that, but I'm making sure that everybody knows that.
I appreciate that.
So my only point, Mr. Slayton, is if we agree to the 7,500, I'm fine with that, it's under cost, et cetera, but I would say, could we at least be a little bit proactive and say, could we get that 7,500 with a band in the end zone? You know, because it might be the ideal situation, we might as well be proactive now, thinking about it that way.
And that's something you could look at the cost, and that's something you could tell us, like, hey,
Or also you
that's-
look at the design, to say, does it make sense?
Yes, sir. Yes, yeah.
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 And can we possibly use what we already have? and
Sure,
add to it?
I'm not gonna look at what you've got, but assuming it's in good shape, it's certainly possible. We can take a look at that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I meant the ones that are in the end zone now.
But you can never.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
I'm just saying, could we be proactive and actually
They
have a
are,
nice
they're
looking
movable. They're
band section?
Yeah,
movable.
but you need twice as many.
Right, but at least
At
you
least.
got half. I mean, it's a start.
Okay, so I think what I understand for us moving forward is looking at 7,500 with band in the end zone, a 70-30 split. Parking closer to the stadium on both ends versus away from, which would replace a field replacement and the high jump pits. And then alternates in the lighting, the RBG lighting, so that have some alternates in with the lighting, and reuse our current lights at a current middle school or the new middle school or a field.
So just one point of clarification, so 7,500 parking less whatever parking we're bringing over from the existing stadium?
7,500 seats.
I'm sorry, 7,500 seats, thank you. So we don't know exactly how many that is, but I'm taking whatever that is and subtracting that out of the 7,500, and I'm providing those in the,
I would leave that out of the equation.
okay.
I'm not understanding.
Create.
I think he's talking about the 377, those band stands
Oh.
over there.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry, what I was hearing was 7,500 including the band seating. Are we providing new band seating at 1,200?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm
7,500 plus.
7,500 plus the
1,200
1,200.
No, I was thinking
No.
7,500 total with 1,200 in the end.
12 of them being in the end zone.
Okay.
The band would be included
That's
in the
why we wouldn't
7,500.
just
Like
move
70, 30.
Yeah.
So that's
I-
6,300.
Okay, I was, I
That's not
mean,
what I thought.
yeah, I was thinking 7,500 total in the seats in the stadium.
Right.
And then with the potential for the band in the end zone, whether that's now, whether that's later, something you grow into that, so not a 7,500 total with the band.
I agree with that. The band is, they can sit for now, but we grow into maybe
Putting them in the end zone.
Right, if you design it, the end zone to have the stands there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That way you have your video,
Yeah.
board. You don't wanna have to come back and move that
Right.
later.
Right.
If you put stands in.
It's like putting a lawnmower inside a courtyard.
Yes.
I'm considering
Design it
myself a
up front
loser
so
in this
that it
debate,
looks
so
like-
I'll let y'all decide.
And honestly, I do need to look at the
Yes,
feasibility to
I
make
consider
sure that
myself
that's
a
all gonna
loser, so I'll let y'all
work.
decide whether-
Marty,
That
real
just
quick,
wanted to say.
you have as far as the video board, I think you've got $1 million in there right now. Have you priced any of those, Daktronics or any of those guys to see kind of?
All right, so I fortunately, at the conference this weekend, I tracked down Daktronics. They had agreed to have me 3 pricing options, a good, better, and best.
Okay.
I've not seen that yet. It may be stuck in my spam filter or something. But I did do a little research. I found out that Melissa's board was $1.5 million at bid date in 2021. Okay, so we would have to inflate that out to today's dollars. And then they did their ring or their halo, you know, that goes around was another 300,000. So I thought I was a little surprised that was less than I would have guessed. But so we've got that as a frame of reference. So I have $1 million in there. I think $1 million gets you a perfectly functional, solid video playback playboard. But if you wanted to look at another option that gives you a little more capability, a little more size, a little more definition perhaps, that's another fairly easy alternate, provided I'm not building a massive structure around it that then would have to change, right? And so I wouldn't recommend we do a whole lot of, put a stone around it or things like that. I would do where the video itself is the screen is the showpiece.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
to the extent that my opinion matters anymore.
Doesn't.
No, and it doesn't. I would much prefer if you get those bids and those estimates, and I'm about the in-game experience, lights, scoreboards, kids, technology, music, all that.
And-
I would much rather see the money spent on those types of in-game experiences as opposed to parking spaces,
Or seating.
streets,
Sure.
and seats that aren't ever gonna be used.
I think that there's something to be said to have to engage the kids in the production. That's pretty cool.
Can you, Jeff, can you reach out to Jeff Williams and make sure they're bidding that too?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely, we'll do that.
Yeah, transportation costs will be cut down for shipping.
If we put a sign up there, they should cut off.
So what we ended up.
I think it all comes from China.
7,500, But at
Yeah.
a 70-30 split, and then we'll deal with the in-zone ban thing later.
Right. Prepare a plan for it, the
Yeah.
spacing for it, and then
7,500,
look at these alternates,
70-30
and if
split.
we need to, look at the alternates.
Sold.
So we're basically looking at number 4 with some adaptations.
Okay. Anyone else have anything? All right, the time is 6:13 PM and we are adjourned for this meeting.